Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the Third Tier podcast. You are going to have to put up with me hosting tonight, I'm afraid, because Tom is enjoying a well-earned holiday. And I'm very pleased to announce that I'm joined once again by a new regular co-host, Graham, from What the Falk podcast. Graham, are you well?
Brilliant. Yeah, top of the world, banging, can't complain. 3 points. Yep, thank you very much. I'll take that. Good weekend, mate.
Very nice. That's it. Short and sweet. I like that. Lovely. And also pleased to say, making his second appearance on the podcast is well-renowned EFL expert and general nice guy, Gabe Sutton. How you doing, mate?
I'm very well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for that big intro. You've built me up, so I guess I've got to live up to that now.
Good. We're doing all well. Well, it's great to be back, isn't it? I think first and foremost, and that's talking about League One football. But more importantly, League One football with supporters in grounds up and down the country. Supporters were flooding in their droves to watch their team play. I know Sunderland's Sunderland had the highest attendance in the division at the weekend, around 31,000. Gills was around 5,000, but it felt like 5,500. And Gabe, I believe, went to watch Wycombe versus Accrington. So we should have at least 3 games covered in depth. And then we'll have a look at the division as a whole. So I'm going to come to you first, Graham. Positive start, especially considering that you conceded the first goal. Charlie White was kept quiet. So I want to get your thoughts on the Sunderland victory over Wigan Athletic.
Charlie White. Yeah, very good. Very happy. I mean, in truth, I was absolutely buzzing after the game. If you'd spoken to me at 5:05, 5:30, I would have been absolutely flying and probably telling you that we're going to win the league. But I've learned my mistake on this show from saying that about Sunderland, because when I tend to say it, we tend to go in a bad run of form. But it's early days, really early days when you really think about it. It's the first game. I think a lot of people have spoke Wigan up an awful lot because of the signings that they've made, and that makes sense. They have made decent signings. I think a lot of people have looked at Sunderland's maybe lack of business and the players that we've lost, some of them to Wigan, and thought that we might not challenge. I hope, based on Saturday's performance and the fact that we still played without any fullbacks, Carl Winchester at right back, Dan Neil in attacking number 10, central midfield, if you prefer, left back. They both played against 2 new signings, and Jordan Jones came on obviously later on, and Edwards, who scored. And we came through the game and were well-deserved winners, and it should have probably been slightly more. Lyndon Gooch's brilliant shot didn't cannon off the bar. So if we can keep that level of performance up and add a couple of fullbacks, then the signs are positive. But for Sunderland, it's about consistency. We've seen many times that Sunderland can be the best side in this division over the years that they've been here, but not on a consistent basis. So I'd be intrigued to see how often it could be, because if you look at Saturday's game, you would say, well, who needs fullbacks to win the league? Because we didn't play with any. But I think that would catch up with us, and there's still maybe 1 or 2 players I would quite like. But the big difference is for me, Callum Doyle. I don't know if people have seen the highlights of him from Saturday. 17-year-old kid from Manchester City. There's no way we'll hang on to him. He'll play for Manchester City in 3 or 4 years' time. He's just 6'3", built like a brick
house.
Man, a brick house, yes. Brilliant, really, really good. Elliot Embleton looks like he's came on an absolute load at being a Blackpool, which is maybe not a surprise. I was never his biggest fan, and I thought he was positive. He looked like something that was different. And I think the overall take from the game for me, and I don't mean to offend any Wigan fans here, and like I say, the season is long and things can change, but you're sort of seeing why we weren't going to get promoted with the likes of Charlie White and Max Power and Jordan Jones in the team, and why we might get promoted with the likes of Elliot Embleton inside of the team.
Very good summing up there, I think. Gabe, I'll come to you then quickly. Obviously, Graham's doing it from a Sunderland fan perspective. What are your thoughts on Lee Johnson's outfit at this very embryonic stage of the season?
Yeah, I think it's a good start for Sunderland, considering their squad is a long way from being complete. And I think part of me quite liked the fact, strangely enough, that they've taken time over their transfer business, because to me it shows that even though they've got the money now to make big statement signings, they're still being sort of sensible about it, and they're weighing things up, and they're taking their time and only going in for the right deals. At the moment, they've got Carl Winchester at right back. I think he's played there maybe previously in his career. He's certainly been a very versatile operator from the time at Oldham a few years back. That was under Lee Johnson as well. And then they've got the left back, which is Daniel Neal, who's come through the academy. And again, very good to see lots of talented young players coming through the academy at Sunderland as well. So I think that's definitely a positive. And I like to see that process at Sunderland, where you either sign players for the right deals, good players for the values that Sunderland are looking for, or you put your trust in youth in some positions. And it's been a while for me since Sunderland had that.
Yeah, and like you say, I think the biggest thing is that they are, like most teams in this division at the moment, is probably 95% of the clubs in League One are still some way from being at full capacity in terms of the players that they want to get in. Just a quick couple of hellos. Evening, Les from East Yorkshire. He's a Gills fan. Jonathan Harry's friend of the show. Good evening, mates. And I think Atha's comment is directed at you, Graham. He's hoping you keep Elliot Embleton fit for a deadline day swoop. I think we'll leave that there.
I was going to say, I think he wants to play for a big club this season, so hopefully he'll stay.
And last, no, we've got a couple more now. Ian Bradley, friend of the show as well, a Rotherham fan. Watch you guys. How you doing, Ian? Good to see you. And Simply Wickham. Evening, mates. Evening, gents. Wickham taking Sam Lavelle from Morecambe. Just one thing on yours and the left-back situation, I think, at Sunderland. Isn't it rumoured that the young Tottenham left-back, is it Dennis Churchin, has apparently had his contract ripped up and he's going to come and join on a permanent basis, I think. So that could be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
It's an interesting one, I think, because I'm not going to... I like to say I know a fair amount about football, but I genuinely never seen him play. As you do on Twitter, you tend to look at like how the reaction of the selling club is, and 9 times out of 10, the fans' reaction to that tends to bear fruit. And they're all absolutely devastated. There was one guy who I think is over exaggerating, said, his season ago he would have wanted nothing less than 7-8 million based on his talent alone. And I'm thinking, geez, where's this kid come from? But I think if what I read's correct, he's had a few, should we say, personal issues, which is maybe halted his progress a little bit. I think he wants to maybe probably get a fresh move away, as some players do and some people do in life, don't they? And get a fresh start and get first in football, most importantly. And hey, we don't have a left back at the minute. Dan Neal's playing there, but Dan Neal's more like a number 10 in my opinion. So the reports from Spurs fans are like very, very high. And the last left back we had from Spurs was Danny Rose. Blotted his copybook a little bit by going to Newcastle, but I let him off. But he wasn't bad. He did the job. He was actually class. So if he's anywhere near as good as Danny Rose at a League One level, thank you very much. I'll have him. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on, isn't it? A little bit of the unknown, but a little bit of excitement because of the background. But just to sort of nullify the enthusiasm, Jill signed a centre-back who was a Tottenham kid last season. He played about 4 games. Anyway, moving on.
Was he good?
Not really, no. He played 4 games. There's your clue. Right. Let's do it in alphabetical order. Sorry to everyone, we haven't got graphics tonight. Obviously, Tom's usually in charge of them, and I have to run my own channel, and Graham has to run his own podcast, so we've not had time to do them. So you're just going to have to look at our mugshots for an hour, I'm afraid. But we'll start running down through the results from Saturday, the opening weekend in alphabetical order. I know Gabe's going to take the Wickham game in more detail. Obviously, I'll take the Gills one. But let's start off with Crewe versus Cheltenham. That finished 1-1 on the opening day. Mika Mandron, ex-Gills and ex-Sunderland striker, scored the goal. Very good goal as well. But that's probably a better result for Cheltenham based on the fact that they've just come up. Would you say so, Gabe?
I think it's a better result. I also think that it's probably a better performance from what a lot of Cheltenham fans have been saying. They feel they created enough chances to win that game, which I think is quite good news for the Robins, because I was sort of on the EFL fan show on Wednesday night talking to Ant Evans and the Robins Report podcast. And I think one thing that kind of stood out was that certainly from a Cheltenham perspective, with Tom Wade from the Robin Report. There's a few areas where Cheltenham fans feel that they're a little bit short. There's maybe some question marks over whether Ellis Chapman's going to step up to League One level, given that he didn't feature loads, partly due to injury, maybe in League Two. And then I think Andy Williams has been quite an opinion dividing centre forward. There's a few people that are maybe not sure he can make the step up at about 34, 35. Other people who are maybe defending him, which might be a bit, because it might be a bit harsh, some of the criticism of him, given that I think his goals per minute ratio last season was pretty good. So Cheltenham needs to do a lot of business. All the players that started, outfield players certainly, were at the club last season, and even the goalkeeper, Owen Evans, was there in their playoff season in 1920. So I still think that Cheltenham will be in need of some new players. They've obviously added Taylor Perry from Wolves, so that certainly adds their options in midfield, and they've obviously got Callum Wright back from Leicester, which is great news. But I still think they need a striker, which probably feeds into the news that they've been after Kyle Vassell, and now signed Kyle Vassell as well, who I think will offer a variety of qualities. Really, he's reasonably mobile, reasonably strong, and has a little bit of championship experience from his time at Rotherham. So I think it was a good signing for Cheltenham, considering that there's still a little bit of work for them to do in the transfer window.
Yeah, and just one quick thing as well. It seems that we know our crew play. I know we spoke about this last week, didn't we, Graham, on the 1 to 24s, and they like to get it. Centre halves and fullbacks like to go and get it off their keeper, and they like to play it out from the back and play it around their back, and sometimes it leads to a little bit of trouble. And it seems that, unfortunately, I know it's only one game, but for what Omar Beckles was doing last season, particularly against the Gills at the Priestfield, Donovan Daniels decided to do it at the weekend, and Andy Williams had a very simple equaliser, didn't he? So if he's one that's got to try and win over the fans, that will certainly help, because Donovan Daniels laid it on a plate for him, didn't he? But yeah, a solid point, I think, for both sides. And it's a starting block, isn't it? Like in any sort of competition, if you can get away with the first game without losing, it gives you something to work with. This isn't in alphabetical order at all. I don't know why I said that. It's in the order that I watched it on the Quest highlights. So we'll move on to the next game that I've written down, and that was Cambridge United against Oxford. I think me and Graham and Tom all had Cambridge to get relegated in our 1 to 24s. Gabe, where did you have them positioned?
I had them relegated as well.
So it was a full house, but that's definitely a better point for Cambridge than Oxford, looking at the comparative squads, and it's a good early start for them. It's not a disaster for Oxford. They're on the road and they've picked up a point on the opening day. Like we keep saying, everyone's still trying to find their best 11s and put people into positions that they know they're going to thrive. But we spoke about Steve Seddon, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, Gabe, and said that we both thought he was an upgrade on Josh Ruffles, and he had a very good game at the weekend. So it's just a case now, I think, with Oxford, whether they can replace Rob Atkinson. I know they've brought in Jordan Fanili from Blackpool on loan, but in terms of the game itself, similar to probably Crewe and Cheltenham, isn't it? It's a decent point for both sides. Graham or Gabe, either of you go.
I mean, looking at obviously the stats and stuff like that, and what you've seen on Quest, it's different. I mean, I'm sure Cambridge fans and Oxford fans who watched the full 90 plus will say different, but in terms of shots that they both had, I think they were quite similar. I'm sure it was like 10 each or something like that between Cambridge and Oxford, but there was like 3 on target for Oxford, 1 on target for Cambridge. I'm guessing that includes the penalty that they scored at the end. But you look at how slowly Oxford started last season. I think they lost the first 4 or something, or won 1 in the first 5 and lost the other 4. One of them, the Sunderland, who ended up being obviously one of their rivals, and I think they lost another one. I'm pretty sure it was Lincoln opening day of the season, I think they lost to. And they came back and did all right. I know they were probably playing catch up, and they kind of sneaked in on the last day, didn't they, with Portsmouth failing against Accrington. But I'm not the biggest fan of Carl Robinson as a bloke, but he's very much League One material, isn't he? He knows how to get a side in and around those spots, and they've got a decent set of players they brought in. They produce good younger players that they produce and then sell on. Rob Atkinson being the main one. He only played, his debut a couple of seasons ago, if that. It might have even been last season, come to think of it. So I think Oxford will go on and do well. I think they were probably quite unlucky to get a side like Cambridge away on the opening day. Everyone's up for it. Fans haven't been back for 18 months. Cambridge away is a lot harder at the start than it is at the end. Unless Cambridge prove me wrong and end up having a fantastic season and so on and so forth. But if if things go the way we expected to go, and all three of us have predicted, which I think they'll be there or thereabouts, the bottom 5, bottom 6. When the pressure's on and you're kind of in March, April, and they're kind of struggling to stay up, and you're Oxford and you're 7th, 6th, 5th, wherever it may be, might be a bit of a different game. Probably not an unexpected result, a good result for a side that's just come up versus a promoted team that probably would have preferred to play that game a couple of months down the line, I think.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Pretty much sums it up. Ian Bradley's just commented back to the Cheltenham signing of Carl Vassell. We know it has been confirmed. Thank you, Ian. And yeah, says if Michael Duff can keep him permitted and interested, and he's a very good player, tends to score worldies. Yeah, I think that's probably the general consensus. Gabe's nodding his head, and that's always a good sign. He's very good when he's on it. Is he on it enough? Potentially not in the last couple of seasons, but he could potentially be a good foil for Alfie May. Completely different type of centre forward, and yeah, certainly one to keep an eye on. But Gabe, I'm going to come to you now. Next game was probably game of the day. Bolton Wanderers 3, MK Dons 3. I think it was mentioned on the Quest highlights that these teams are probably going to be two of the most fun to watch. Probably won't keep too many clean sheets if they continue to play the way they did yesterday. But there was two really good goals that stood out, weren't there? Two set pieces. I think one was from...
well, there was one from Josh Sheehan,
and another Swine as well. Really good free kicks. But what did you make of, obviously, the newly promoted Bolton and also the now Russell Martin-less MK Dons?
Well, it's been a very destabilising week for MK, and after losing Russ Martin, I think a lot of MK fans are very disappointed in the manner in which Russ Martin left, and listen, we'll be here all night if we discuss the rights and wrongs of that. But I think the bottom line is there's a kind of a sense of division, because lots of fans are feeling very angry, and other fans are sort of willing to maybe wish Russ well, thank him for the progress, and move on. And I think that, or certainly not sort of offer that sort of vitriol in the way that some fans have provided. So I think there's a sense of division there, and I do feel that kind of filtered into the club. And when the news broke out to me, and the way that there are a few chants put towards Russ Martin at the Bournemouth game, where he's actually in the dugout for that one, and my sort of reaction to that was they've got to bring Dean Lewington into the dugout, because with Luke Williams and I think one or two other coaches, maybe Matt Gill, moving on with Russ Martin to Swansea, who's going to be that coach? It didn't feel like, I think they may have one guy who's the academy manager, but it felt like MK Dons needed a figure that they can all get behind, someone who can unite the club, and that's why I suggested Dean Lewington. He's obviously very much a legendary figure at MK because of his involvement with the football club, and I think a few people were maybe a little bit sceptical about that at first, because Dean Lewington's never actually wanted to play to manage. He's never shown any real interest in that. So I don't expect this to be any more than a 1 or 2 game situation. And I think that MK fans will be hoping that there is an appointment soon. I think Jody Morris is the current favourite. So that situation needs to be resolved. But someone that didn't want to manage, I think Lewington's done a good job on this opening day. And yeah, absolutely, 2 cracking free kicks there. Josh Sheehan and Scott Twine, 2 really creative midfielders, both capable of brilliance. And yeah, great way to start the season with plenty of late drama as well.
Yeah, definitely. Like I say, it's probably, we was going to talk about it a bit later, but I think it's probably game of the day for everybody, isn't it? In League One, you've got absolutely everything there. A couple of good set pieces, goals galore, mistakes, late strikes, points being rescued. There's the sort of comeback story from Bolton as well, isn't it? Who was shown the door pretty much by Martin, and he's been brought back into the fold by Lewington and scored the 3rd goal for MK Dons. So plenty of sort of side stories in that one that'll be interesting to see how they develop as the season go on. We're going to come to the next game, Graham, and another question I was going to ask off later in the podcast was, who was your performance of the weekend? I'd certainly have it as this team going to Portman Road, and that was Morecambe. We had the directors on, Charlie and James, a few weeks ago, and they're both very bullish that they're certainly not in this division to make up the numbers, and that convinced me to not have them in the relegation zone in my 1-24. And I think if they show anything like the spirit and the desire and the little bit of quality as well that they did at Portman Road, I think they probably will be fine. And I know it's only one game of 46, but encouraging signs for the team making their debut at this division, and we're unlucky not to win all 3 points. What was your thoughts on the Ipswich draw with Morecambe?
Yeah, I was sort of taken aback at first, because I think I said they'd go down bottom. I still think they might, if I'm honest. To be completely honest, I think they've lost too much. And everything I said about Cambridge, I'll repeat the same, but I think it was a much tougher game. Like, you've only got to look through Ipswich's side and who they've signed. And I know they've not been that great in League One, but it feels like they've done what Sunderland should have done about 2 years ago and gone, this division's awful to be in for a club of our size. Let's just sign players that make sure we get out of it. And then, lo and behold, they're going to home to Morecambe. But from what I've seen and the highlights and the statistics, it seems like they were fairly in control. I mean, obviously, I think Ipswich had more of the ball, had more touches, certainly had more shots, but not like a mountain more. You'd expect the home side always to have more shots, more possession, because especially the home fans being back, as we touched on before with Cambridge. And it seems like they weren't put under any massive pressure. The fact that they've got a lad that's went and scored 2 goals as well in Cole Stockton, as obviously the guys just mentioned just there. You want your number 9 to be getting 2 goals on the opening day of the season as a team that will be, or potentially could be there or thereabouts near the relegation spots, at least wants to stay away from them and have a positive season and stay in this division come May. You want your striker to be scoring goals. If he goes 4 or 5 games without scoring a goal, you suddenly start going, is he really this level? Is he really that good? And hey, things might not go very well after this, but it's a good start, isn't it? You want your number 9 to be scoring goals. You want to put in a good performance, at least, even if you lost, say, 2-1 at Ipswich, you can take lots of positives from that. The truth is, their fans were probably quite gutted that it didn't come to the fact that they won with Macaulay Bonne, obviously scoring in the, I think, 92nd or 93rd minute or something along that line. So really impressive. I think opposite end of the spectrum, my club and many clubs who want to get promoted this season, if they went to Ipswich and got a draw and it was due to a last-minute equaliser from Ipswich, I think most teams would be pretty happy. So Morecambe's got to be chuffed with that.
Yeah, totally agree. I think most people had Ipswich to win that fairly comfortably, didn't they, Gabe?
I actually had a draw.
Oh, you did, yes.
You can go back and check it. I
did have a look at your Betflictor blog, yes. Fair play. See, Mr. EFL. I called it at the start. I said he knows everything about the EFL. So fair enough. Yeah,
but no, I think just to kind of add to that, like, I think what you're looking at there is 2 teams that have had quite big turnovers. Ipswich, unsurprisingly so, because they've got new ownership and new manager relatively, and they wanted to kind of recruit to overhaul after a few years of failure, really. But Morecambe are actually in the unusual situation of changing a lot of their squad even after winning promotion. And I think that when you've got 2 new teams that are just coming together, generally it's easier for the team that's got to do the simple things, is stay pretty compact and then get the ball forward quickly. Whereas for Ipswich, it was more a case of having to break them down over long spells of possession. They ended up having 67%. So I think that possibly worked in Morecambe's favour in the end.
Yeah, totally agree. And yeah, it's a good point for both. And I think what it does, though, is it definitely shows. It's a good point for Morecambe because most people, not you, had them to get beaten and fairly routinely, I think. But it's probably a good point for Ipswich because I think certainly pre-Paul Cook, they wouldn't have come back and won that game. And it certainly also shows the strength in depth they've got, certainly in forward areas when you can bring on James Norwood and Macaulay Bonne to replace other people. Scott Fraser scored a really good goal as well. And talking of transfers, we've just seen a couple of bits today. They've signed both Kyle Edwards and Hayden Coulson. They've brought them in today. So 2 more added to the Ipswich roster. I think that's 14 or 15 for the summer now. And they're certainly trying to strengthen that back line, aren't they? Because that's probably where they were weakest last season. I remember Gilles beating them 3-1 at Priestfield, and they were very, very pedestrian. The likes of Luke Chambers, very easy to play around. But yeah, so they brought in, and obviously George Edmondson earlier in the window as well looks to be a very clever addition. So Ipswich, I can see why they're everybody's tip, including mine, to win the title. But next game was Rotherham United against Plymouth, and that finished in a fairly routine 2-0 win for the home side. For me, Plymouth's problems from last season resurfaced again. I had James Wilson down as a potential key player for them in a recent blog to try and rectify their defensive issues, but they were all over the show for both goals again, unfortunately. But we shall bring up a couple of comments from Ian Bradley because he is a Rotherham fan. He says he likes the look of Bolton, but they may turn out to be Rochdale at 21-22 and score and concede loads of goals. I get the sentiment, but I don't think they'll be anywhere near sort of the position that Rochdale found themselves in. But yeah, certainly looking at the first game, they could be entertaining to watch. And he's also praised Cole Stockton that Graham's mentioned and said 2 very good finishes. But Ian's team, fairly routine for them, wasn't it, Graham? 2-0, good start. Paul Warne knows how to get out of this division.
Yeah, I think we spoke about Plymouth on the podcast, and I really rate Brian Lowe, but I just feel like Portsmouth, well, they might get relegated as well, but I think Plymouth particularly will go down. But there was my moment of the week came in the Rotherham game. There's some quite funny songs being sung at Charlie Wyke, obviously on Saturday, which I'm sure some of the fans will have heard and other people will have. But Freddie Ladapo obviously was getting, I think, a few chants from Plymouth fans saying that he would always be, I don't know if I can swear on this, but I'm going to say SHIT. And as they were chanting at Adam, Rotherham put the corner in and he banged right in front of them, which is exactly what it should be like on the opening day of the season with fans returning back. So Freddie Ladapo gets my moment of the week. But I think Rotherham just have the ability to be strong, don't they? I think I tipped them to be like 8th or something last season because they're kind of, no offense to Rotherham, but almost unassuming. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, they're not bad actually. They did it a few years ago before the pandemic. They came down and I thought, well, they'll be there or thereabouts, 7th, 8th, maybe sneak into the playoffs. And they came to the Stadium Light. We went 1-0 up in the first 30 seconds and they were just a well-oiled engine. And they just did what they needed to do to get back into the game and almost sneaked it. And I think they're going to have that ability throughout the season. They've got a manager that knows the club. They've got a manager that knows how to get out of the division, a manager that's liked, and a manager that seems to have his trust of his players. So a good opening day win for them. Very much so against a side who I think will go down or be there or thereabouts. I don't think they're going to be promotion contenders, let's say. But nonetheless, a clean sheet, a win, your striker gets off the mark. That's kind of what you want, isn't it? It's like, I think you want your striker to score in the first game. You want to win your first game, be it home or away. You want to be relatively comfortable and inject some positivity there as you go into the end of the transfer window and hopefully add to it. And all of a sudden you feel a lot happier, don't you? So I think Rotherham, yeah, they're going to be there or thereabouts. They're a very well-oiled machine.
Yep. And Ian's just added to that and said, very pleased with the performance, looks solid. Argyle, okay in patches, impressed with Jordan Houghton. He was decent for a while when he was on loan at Gills, but that was a few years ago now. Then he had a decent enough spell at MK Dons in League Two.
Well, can I just add to that, Matt, if you don't mind? Because what really interests me, just looking at Ian's comment about Jordan Houghton, and he's a pretty reliable sort of holding midfielder at this level, I would say, but he does have some really big competition this year because I've talked to a few Torquay United fans on Twitter and they've said Adam Randell, who was on loan there last season, was absolutely brilliant in terms of his technical ability, pressing off the ball, literally anything that you could ask in terms of a defensive midfielder. So I'm really excited to see how Adam Randell steps up to the level. If anyone's seen that game, feel free to drop in the comments and say how he did in his substitute appearance. He's someone I'm really excited about. So I do think that if Jordan Houghton does have a drop in form for Argyle, it'll be really interesting competition for Randell. So I think from everything Torquay found, he's a player with huge potential.
That's it, yeah, and obviously we want fans of these teams to comment and let us know, because as much as we try to keep an eye on it as a division as a whole, people that are watching these teams week in, week out can give us more insight and more information, and that's the idea. So just a quick hello to Charlie. He says, evening, Matt, Graham and Gabe. Thank you, Charlie, still watching, even though you're no longer in League One. Right, next game was... Accrington Stanley 0, Portsmouth 1. So a decent start for Danny Cowley and Nicky Cowley. I noticed Connor Ogilvie played centre midfield in this game, which was very interesting to see, because I don't think he's played a game there in his entire career. But he can't have been too bad because they kept a clean sheet and won 3 points to bring all the way back to the South Coast. Gabe, I'm going to come to you again. What do you make of Portsmouth at the moment in terms of where they are with their squad? I mean, they've got a lot of good players, but they still just look short in key areas if they get a couple of injuries. And I think that's probably emphasised by the fact that Mr. Ogilvie's had to fill in the middle of the park at the weekend. Yeah,
I mean, I know Connor Ogilvie's versatile, but I feel like that's pushing it a little bit, putting him in midfield. But I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? Because Danny Cowley's got quite a lot of solid left-footed defenders. You look at Clark Robertson as a centre-back, Lee Brown as a left-back, and then Ogilvie, who can play centre-back or left-back. But I suppose what's interesting about Lee Brown is that his goal scoring form since Danny Cowley's took charge has been surprisingly strong. I think it was quite early on certainly there was one game last season, I can't quite remember where it was, but Lee Brown got forward to score a couple of goals, and it's not something that you'd maybe associate ordinarily with Lee Brown, because under Kenny Duckett he was this solid, dependable left back that would kind of support Ronan Curtis from behind, but maybe make the odd overlapping run, but not really offer too much confidence in possession. But I think that under Danny Cowley, that side of his game seems to have gone up a level. So I still think that Portsmouth will be hoping to make some signings late in the window, but you've got to say, like, Gassan Hadme and John Marquise have formed up a really good partnership in pre-season, so looking forward to seeing how that develops. So there's a few exciting elements to Portsmouth this season, but I still think they'll be after a few more signings, especially in midfield.
Yeah, like most teams, I believe as well. There's still plenty of time in the window for people to get more through the door. But yeah, solid start for the Cowleys, and like I say, probably weren't at their best, and still trying to learn their best 11, and still managed to pick up 3 points and a clean sheet. It's you again, Gabe. Sorry, it's your game to feature now. Me and Graham will just sit back and enjoy this for the next few minutes. Accrington Stanley went to Wickham and lost 2-1, and in fairness, I think it was a lot more comfortable for Wickham than the scoreline suggests. They scored twice very early on. We're up 2-0 up inside 15 minutes, I believe. Two very good Gareth McCleary goals, I think, and a late one from Accrington sort of made it look like a more even game. But you watched it in detail, so we'll let you take to the floor and give your in-depth analysis on the Chairboys' win over Accrington Stanley.
Yeah, Matt, I was really impressed with the Chairboys today. I think their front three this season. I don't want to draw conclusions based on one game. I always say comments, not conclusions. That's my opening day motto. But if Daryl Horgan, Sam Vokes and Gareth McCleary keep up that level of performance, I think we could potentially be looking at one of the best attacking trios in the division, just because they complement each other so well, because you've got the aerial prowess of Sam Vokes, who's so useful for Wickham from goal kicks. You've got the movement and the intelligence of Gareth McCleary, who I think has lots of quality on the ball, as you'd expect from someone that's played regular championship level before with Reading. But also you've got he's brilliant off the ball as well, by the way. But also you've got the running in behind, the energy of Daryl Horgan. And I think they complement each other so well. And that aspect of their game really impresses me. And Anthony Stewart as well, such a good centre back. And he kind of allows Jack Brimmer and Joe Jacobson to kind of operate really well as wide full centre backs as well, because you've got Jack Brimmer with his athleticism covering that channel, and then Joe Jacobson with his obvious technical ability. So many good things. Ollie Pendlebury as well, another former Reading player, looked really good on his debut in midfield, promoted from the development squad. I think with Accrington Stanley though, and Ian said that Vokes could be a massive success at Adams Park. I think that Accrington Stanley, they tried to play out from the back, but I'm not sure they've got defenders that are going to be good for that, because they've got Ross Sykes, who's got lots of qualities, as I mentioned in my post-match video, but he's a very athletic player, very good in the air. And I think what you want him to be doing is playing it into a midfielder, dropping deep, and then absolutely charging forward. But Accrington Stanley were without Seamus Keneally, and I think without that player that can collect the ball off the defence naturally and then give it to someone else. Harry Pell tried to do that, not particularly well. I'm not sure Sean McComb will really do that role. Keneally's going to be back in a couple of weeks, which I think is going to be huge for Accrington Stanley, especially in terms of the way they play.
That's it. It's early doors again, isn't it? And it doesn't mean if you lose the game that you're going to struggle all season, and certainly if you win a game, it doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be in the top six. But yeah, certainly a very encouraging start from Gareth Ainsworth's men, and we know he knows how to get out of this division. He's very good at this level. He has been for a number of years, longest serving manager, I think, or one of, I think, in this division now, along with John Coleman, who he beat. So simply Wickham's just commented and said result doesn't do the Wickham performance justice. On another day, could have been 4 or 5. Yeah, I think it's just emphasising what you said, Gabe, that Wickham were very, very impressive for long periods. And yeah, I think it probably flattered Accrington a little bit, the 2-1 scoreline. But long season, as we've already mentioned. And Ian Bradley's commented again. Cheers, Ian, and says Vokes could be massive, a massive success at Adams Park. I think, yeah, in terms of pedigree, certainly a few years ago, it's a very good signing. And if he can get his shooting boots back on, so to speak, then I think he'll flourish at this level, and it could prove to be one of the signings of the season if he does hit the ground running. Graham, going to come to you now. Your game, Sunderland 2, Wigan 1. I know we touched on it briefly at the top of the show, but I wanted to just get some more in-depth analysis from you. Seems there were some good performances from the likes of Elliot Embleton and Ross Stewart. But yeah, let us know what your thoughts were, mate, on the 2-1 victory at the Stadium of Light.
I mean, Ross Stewart was absolutely outstanding. I think a lot of people have seen Sunderland fans talk about how Charlie White wasn't much of a loss, and for some reason people have taken that as if we've chucked our toys out of our pram. But we watched Charlie White for 3 seasons, and I think there's a few Wigan fans, don't judge any player too early, don't get me wrong, and it's one game and a few pre-season games, but some Wigan fans are already having the frustration that we had with Charlie White for a long time. He's a bit of a start year sometimes. Feed him, that's no problem, but you need Nathan McGeady, and there's not many of them in this division to feed him. Ross Stewart's a little bit of a different beast. Don't think he'll score 30 goals. I think he's a different kind of player like that, in the sense that we might get more goals over the season. You'll likely get more assists. Charlie White didn't get that many assists. He wasn't that great for flick-ons and stuff like that, as big as he was. Ross Stewart just ran the channels so well. He was just so big. He's about 6'5", but he's actually really good with his feet. He won the penalty, which was one with a little bit of trickery with his feet getting into the box. Bit rash from the Wigan defender, but I suppose when you've got a big lad that size running at you, you've got to stop him somehow, and he chose just the wrong option, basically. He actually rose above Charlie White for the winner, which, of course, would give us a lot of joy, because that was quite funny. But Ross Stewart was outstanding the entire game. He was just so good. McGeady probably underrated in his performance, because we're just so used to it. We're so used to McGeady just being that man that can just torture defences. He does that. He scored his penalty. You've seen every time he got the ball, the Wigan right back was nervous, and I don't think he's the Loch Ness Drogbeer, as he is known. He's actually from Irvine, which is quite far away from Loch Ness. And whilst I'm on the subject of this, do not go into Google Maps and type in Loch Ness, because you'll get a surprise. I don't know if anyone's seen that on Google today, but if you do, don't do it. But yeah, Loch Ness Drogbeer is what he was called, and he's very much like a League One level with his performance on Saturday. Obviously, vastly not as good, but Ross Stewart, I can't talk more highly enough. He was just so good. And we've seen it in flurries last season, particularly in the second leg of the playoffs against Lincoln. He was brilliant that day. And Embleton although he wasn't a super standout, he just carried the ball. And we haven't really had someone that can try and break the lines too much in the sort of 10 role. Obviously, he's wearing number 8, but in that sort of 10 role that he plays, Ross Stewart works well with him based on that one game. Lyndon Gooch, I think, actually got man of the match. Ross Stewart would have been mine. You can probably tell I'm waxing lyrical about him. But I was really unimpressed with Wigan. They were very good in the first 15 minutes. I expected a lot more, but I think I said in the preview our 1-20 format, we spoke about Wigan, and it probably sounded a bit condescending in ways, because I probably have a knack of doing that, unfortunately. But I said Wigan have signed Max Power, Jordan Jones, and Charlie White, who often were derided, played for Sunderland. Why is it since they've gone to Wigan, all of a sudden Wigan become promotion hopefuls, and they've signed a couple of other players like Tom Naylor that have also failed? I think successful Wigan, I was speaking to a Wigan fan on Saturday, successful Wigan would be not being relegation candidates, having a football club and seeing a bright success and finishing 9th or 10th. And I think that's what they looked like. I think the hype around them, I probably expected more, but they looked like a side that will be all right this season. Considering we had no fullbacks, which I've touched on, it was a really good performance. We just look a little bit more together up front. That midfield and that forward line look a little bit more cohesive. The right backs and the left backs are a worry. Wigan got round the back of Daniel a few times. He's a central midfielder. He's a number 10, in my opinion, or at least a number 8. And he's playing at left back and he's right-footed. So it's not unexpected. But if the boy from Tottenham comes in, and if he's the Roberto Carlos that Tottenham fans seem to think he is, we might be all right in that position and allow Daniel to sort of add to that midfield alongside Elliot Embleton. So really positive, but Sunderland's got to be about consistency this season. I've seen Sunderland put in performances as good as that throughout the however many years we've been here, too long for my liking. I think if we go to MK Dons next week, put a similar level of performance in, win that game, then we come up to our next home game, AFC Wimbledon, beat AFC Wimbledon. If we're sitting here on 9 points and we've had 3 successful wins and we're sitting top of the league, then I might start getting really excited that this might be the season.
Yeah, of course. Like we've all said, it's one game, isn't it? It's not going to define your season, the result in the opening day, but promising signs, I suppose. And certainly from Stuart's performance means that you might not miss Charlie White's goals as much as people envisage. And I suppose, Gabe, quickly before we move on to the next game, because we are starting to run out of time, was Wigan might take a little bit of time to gel, mightn't they? It's a lot of players. It's a big overhaul, and they bought a lot of good players that have been competitive. It's certainly in the top half of the division, but it might take a few weeks for them to really hit their straps and become a cohesive unit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think listen, Liam Richardson worked miracles last season to keep Wigan afloat and on with a skeleton staff and pretty much everything going against him. But I think it's always a slightly different job this year, and I think it'll bring with it its own challenges because there is that extra expectation and a lot of new players coming together. In terms of picking teams to do well, I like to go with teams that have already established a base, some foundations from the previous campaign, and I don't think we can have that. So I would very much agree with Graham that I think if we can finish in the top 10 and are within sight of the playoffs this season, I think that'd be a really progressive season for them, and I think patience is required.
Yeah, and I think they'll get that. I think Richardson will get that. I said in my season preview on my own channel that I think they've got the players to get in the playoffs, but the one thing that could be interesting is how Liam Richardson reacts to a different type of pressure. It's not a pressure now that's trying to stay above a line. It's a pressure of trying to get in over that line and into that top 6, that top 2 or whatever. And it'd be certainly a good watch to see how he does deal with that. I don't see anything to suggest that he won't. Maybe it could just come down to what we've said, and that's how long it takes for them to gel as a unit. So Away Days Beer Company have just commented on and said Loch Ness Drogbeer is going to be the new one released. So if you've not checked out Away Days Beer Company, I will plug them. They've sent me a few bottles over recent weeks and they're very good quality, decent stuff, really good tasting, mixture of ales and yeah. So
I'm happy to try that one. I'm happy to try the Loch Ness Drogbeer. No problem at all. If you want to send me a crate of 50, that's no problem.
A crate of 50. Right, my team's game was Gillingham versus Lincoln City. I'm not going to talk about the incident that happened after the first game. We shall leave that to the authorities. But it was a decent game. It was a decent 1-1 draw between two sides that had a go, that wanted to win the game. And I think the 1-1 draw was probably the fairest result. We started well first 5 minutes and then got caught by a sucker punch. Reece Bennett, who's not a right back, unfortunately got caught out ball watching a little bit. There was plenty of space down the left-hand side. And Connor Bramall, who was very good in tandem with Tayo Eden, especially in the first 25 minutes, putting a dangerous ball across the box. Jamie Cumming made a brilliant save. And then, unfortunately, there was a bit of pinball and Tayo Eden was on hand to slap it into the roof of the net. And for 20 minutes, half hour, Gills was struggling, didn't really get to grips with the system and how Lincoln were playing. Didn't get close enough to Liam Bridcutt. But credit the boys, they stuck at it. They believed in themselves and trusted each other. And probably from 25, 30 minutes on, we were the better team up until half-time. Certainly deserved their equaliser from our point of view. I know Gills have tweeted today the goal reaction video, which has taken absolute pelters from pretty much every account on social media. I tried to give it some context, and a few other fans have as well. It was the fact that we just didn't know what was going on. Generally didn't know what had happened. There was talk of a penalty for Gills. It looked like the keeper, Josh Griffiths, had brought Verdane Oliver down. Then there was talk of he'd fallen into someone and it was going to be a Lincoln free kick. And then all of a sudden the linesman was flagging and it was one each. And Danny Lloyd, we think, has got the goal. We're still not sure 100% from all of about 6 inches. But goal's a goal. Second half was quite open. Both teams had half chances. We had the big opening. That was for Dane Oliver when he was put through 1-on-1. But I think he got caught in two minds and didn't really do anything with it. But yeah, again, like we've said for plenty of teams that have drawn, it's a solid point for both sides. Lincoln are behind in terms of pre-season because they were in the playoffs. Gills are behind in terms of pre-season because we lost 2.5 weeks to COVID. So yeah, I don't think either team were too disappointed. And again, it's a starting block and something to work with approaching the second game next weekend. Right, next game, we're down to the final 3. And then for the final 10 minutes, we'll have a look at next Saturday's fixtures. So Gabe, I'm going to come to you quickly. That was Doncaster Rovers 1, AFC Wimbledon 2. looks like a very different approach from Wimbledon this season without Joe Pigott, and it bore immediate fruit at the weekend.
Yeah, I think a lot of people this season are maybe not quite sure about Wimbledon this year, and I think it's quite an easy thing to do, I suppose, to look at the fact that they've lost Joe Pigott and the goals that he provides, and assume that there's going to be a drop off. But I think that for me, I'm trading that loss against the fact that they're going to have Mark Robinson in charge for the full season. Mark Robinson is someone I rate very highly as a coach. I think he's very composed, very calm, very methodical, and I expect Wimbledon to employ a different style of play to what we've seen usually there. Now, that's not to say that they're going to in any way compromise the non-negotiables, which is lots of passion, lots of hard work, but I do see them keeping it up the ball on the deck a little bit more, and I think that's kind of epitomised by some of the goals, a couple of the goals they've scored. And Ayuba Sal, of course, looks like a real player. He's got him in the goals again. He had a brilliant season last year, and I think getting him tied down to a long-term contract was a sign, really, of the faith that there is in Mark Robinson and the work that he's doing. So great start for Wimbledon. I'm not going to get too carried away about them. Obviously, it's just one game. Comments, not conclusions, but a very good start and a nice early step towards the forward mark.
Exactly that, indeed. Yeah, very positive start for the men from Plough Lane, and looking forward to visiting next Tuesday. As a Gills fan, it's obviously a new one to tick off, and it's great to see them back at their spiritual home. Graham, I'm going to come to you for the penultimate fixture. That was Shrewsbury 0, Burton Albion 1. For me, two teams that will be very similar this season. They both look like defensively they'll be okay. They both look like they're missing a bit of cutting edge, and they both look like they'll be absolutely fine without causing too much trouble to each end of the table. But what's your thoughts on Burton's opening day win and clean sheet?
Yeah, I've tipped Burton to do really well. Not getting to playoffs or anything like that. If I'm honest with you, I don't think they have the strength and depth or the strongest starting 11. But I think I said in the 1 to 24 pod that we did, they've got a manager that just marries well with the club. They're going to be on the crest of a wave because they were dead and buried. If we're completely honest, like last season, they looked like absolutely plummeting out the league. They looked like they were dead and gone. And then Hasselbank comes in and things change and look like one of the better sides in the league. I think barely lost a game towards the end of the season. So I think they'll continue that trajectory and finish, I think I said about 12th or something like that. So it didn't surprise me that they beat Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury are a funny team for me. I feel like they should be better than they are. I think Pierre's a really good player from when I've seen him. Morosi was a really good signing. Banks Landell's been consistent for quite a while. Josh Vale has been there for a while. Luke Lehigh is obviously a good player. He got relegated last season, but he's got a decent left foot on him. Pennington's came from Everton's Youth Academy. Ryan Bowman's came in, who obviously was at Motherwell previously. So I've seen quite a bit of Ryan Bowman. He's strong, he's aggressive, almost too aggressive at points, but kind of what you want at this level. But then I'm not surprised Shrewsbury got beat. There's just something that's not quite right with them at the moment over the past couple of seasons. And I just think that Sam Ricketts' appointment's just knocked them back so much. But again, I don't think they're going to be anywhere near relegation problems. I think it's going to be there or thereabouts. It's probably an expected result, a 1-0. I think I watched a fair amount of their highlights, actually. I don't know why. Don't get me wrong. I didn't plan on doing it. I just watched a lot of their highlights for some reason. And I think Burton probably can feel a little bit hard done by that. They didn't score a few more. Obviously, I think there was just one shot on target from Shrewsbury from a possible, I think they had like 11 or 12 or something like that. Whereas Burton had about 5 shots on target, if I remember rightly. I think it was a Banks Landell, stopped, what was a goal-bound shot going in after they scored the first. But I think Burton will be fine. I quite like Burton. I think they're a nice club. Really nice away day. They've had that tag of the little team when they were in the championship and they kind of dug up some trees and got some decent results. Obviously, they've had a tough couple of years, but they've always had decent players. Like Liam Boyce was there. He went on to do well and doing well for Hearts in the Scottish Premiership, at the moment. I think Burton will be fine. I think they're a team to watch. I wouldn't be surprised if they sneaked in and around maybe where Gillingham were last year, where you can start thinking, can they get into the playoffs? Shrewsbury, on the other hand, I think are probably going to be the opposite end, where you might worry that they might drop into the relegation places. But I've got no rhyme, no reason for that, because Shrewsbury on paper are a decent team. I think they're just suffering from this Sam Rickettsism that they had, although they've got a great manager at the minute and they came back, did really well last season. I think the probably would have wanted to start this season with a win and try and pick up some of that good form from last season rather than the bad form that they had under Sam Ricketts. I think an opening day defeat at home could end up being on a bit of a downward trajectory and they might struggle at the start and then come back and finish mid-table, lower mid-table.
Yeah, I think they'll be fine in terms of relegation. Steve Cotterill's too good a manager to have them anywhere near the bottom four. But yeah, I just think they're probably a little bit short in terms of really pushing into the top 10 and any higher. Final game of the weekend, though, was, unfortunately, I sound a bit like match of the day here, 0-0 between Charlton and Sheffield Wednesday. Probably if you had to pick a game that you didn't think would be 0-0, it would probably been that one. Solid point for both sides, clean sheets to open up. Barry Bannon nearly did Barry Bannon things, skipped through half of the Charlton defence at one point and then slid his shot just wide, much to the despair of Darren Moore on the touchline. I think that would have probably been a goal of the weekend if he'd managed to slot that in the bottom corner. But a solid start for both teams, for Nigel Atkins and for Darren Moore. But we're going to move on quickly now. We have 8 minutes left. Graham, I'm going to come to you quickly. I want you one pick for game of the weekend and one pick for performance of the weekend from a team. Go.
Without being biased?
If you want.
Oh, God. If we're going... Right, I'll try not to be biased because I love Sunderland.
You can say Sunderland if you want. You can say Sunderland twice. We don't mind. It's fine.
No, I'll go Morecambe because I said 24th and I went and pulled out a result against probably the favourite. So it's got to be Morecambe, really. Well done to them getting the draw. Probably should have won. We're talking about them getting the draw. They should have won. What was the other question, Matt?
Game of the weekend. I think it's probably, for me, it would have been either that one or probably the Bolton Wanderers MK Dons. For me, 3-3.
For a neutral, I think you've got to look at a 3-3 and say, yeah, it wasn't Charlton Chef Wed. We know that. Definitely wasn't Charlton.
It didn't look a bad game from the highlights. It didn't look the worst 0-0. I mean, I've seen plenty of worse goalless draws in my time watching the Gills, definitely. But yeah, it's not going to be that one. Gabe, for you, same question.
I would have to be slightly boring and go along with the 3-3, although I did love watching the Wycombe game. But I think that's partly just because it's so great to be back at grounds with fans again. And I think, there's something to be said for that. I suppose as an outside contender for the performance, Morecambe I wouldn't disagree with at all. But I think Cheltenham, considering that there are a lot of question marks over their squad coming into the day and they're playing away to a side that finished in the top half last season, to get 12 shots, 6 on target, lots of positivity for their performance. I don't know if I'd quite go with them for performance the weekend up against someone like Rotherham, but I'd like to mention them.
That's fair enough. Yeah, if we can try and find different ones, I'll do the same as well. Then obviously the standout for game of the weekend is the 3 each and the 2 each between Ipswich and Morecambe. But for a slightly different performance of the weekend, then I'll go Wimbledon. I think everyone's got them down as doomed because they've lost Joe Pigott and they've lost 25 goals a season, and everyone's worrying where they're going to score their goals. They've lost a plenty of experienced players in the summer as well. Luke O'Neill, Callum Riley, that type of player. It looks like Robinson's going to try and change the way they play completely, and fair play to him because that was a very good result against a transitional Doncaster. I'm not going to get too carried away. I don't think Doncaster are going to cause the top places any real trouble this season. But yeah, I'm going to go Wimbledon. Last 5 minutes. Let's have a look ahead to next Saturday. Again, apologies, we don't have a graphic this week. I'll run through fixture by fixture and we'll just go round the three of us then and a quick home win, draw or away win. So I will start with the first one. Gabe, Wimbledon, Bolton.
Wimbledon, Bolton. I'll go with Wimbledon actually for that one.
Graham?
Wimbledon.
I've gone draw. Accrington against Cambridge. Gabe?
I'll go with Accrington.
Graham?
Accrington.
Me, Accrington just. Full house. Burton, Ipswich. Gabe?
I'm going to go with a draw for that one, actually.
Graham?
Burton.
I've got a draw. 1-1 I've put down. Cheltenham, Wycombe?
Wycombe for me.
Cheltenham.
I've got to go Wycombe based on what I saw at the weekend. Lincoln, Fleetwood, Gabe?
Lincoln for me.
Lincoln with ease. Lincoln with ease.
Full house for Lincoln. MK Dons, Sunderland. Gabe, we'll come to you first.
MK might have a manager in by that point. I'll go with the draw.
Don't go against your own team, Sunderland.
I've said draw. I've gone 1-1. Morecambe, Shrewsbury.
I'm going to go Morecambe for that one.
Morecambe.
Full house. I've gone Morecambe as well. Oxford, Charlton.
Oxford, Charlton, the Carl Robinson derby. I'll go. Let me think. Sure. I'm gonna go with Oxford United.
Graham.
Charlton, but there'll be a fight in the tunnel at half time, and Carl Robinson will get headbutted again and complain about it for 6 weeks.
And you can't go a podcast without mentioning it. I'm going to go 1-1. Right, Plymouth, Gillingham game.
Plymouth, Gillingham. Gillingham. I'll say. Have they got? I'll go Plymouth Argyle.
Gills.
I've gone Gills. 2-1 Gills, I think, from what I've seen from their game and our game. I think we've just got enough. Portsmouth Crew. And Gabe's never coming on again.
Draw.
Portsmouth for me. I don't think Portsmouth will be pretty in the first few weeks of the season, but I think they'll just grind out a few results. Sheffield Wednesday, Doncaster, the Darren Moore derby.
Darren Moore derby. I'll go with Sheffield Wednesday.
Sheffield.
Full house and final game, Wigan versus Rotherham.
Rotherham for me.
Draw.
I've gone draw 1-1. And what has Ian Bradley said to end the show? He has said a very tough game at Wigan for the Millers next Saturday, but confident of at least a point. And Les, the Gillingham fan up north, has said, thank you again, lads. Another very enjoyable evening up the Gills. I will echo them sentiments entirely. Up the Gills. Gabe, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on once again. You only need one more, and then we might have to send you a pint glass because that'll be 3. So you get the match ball or something close. Graham, really good to talk to you again, mate. Please keep checking out Gabe on Twitter and follow him. He knows everything about League One. He even knew that Morecambe would get a draw at the weekend. The only other people who predicted that were the Morecambe directors that were on a couple of weeks ago. Go and check out Graham's podcast. There's some really good guests on there. Really good listen all the time. And he's an all right bloke as well.
I was going to say, listen to my podcast because I know nothing about League One. It's like the opposite of Gabe's.
But obviously, the biggest thank you goes to everyone who has tuned in this evening. We will get the audio pod and the link to the YouTube channel out in due course. Like I say, Tom is in charge of that and he's away. So it's Wi-Fi dependent because he's in Scotland. And I'm not even sure they got electricity in certain parts of where he is. But thanks to everyone who's tuned in. It's been a real pleasure. It's great to have football back. It's great to be able to go into stadiums and watch football live and see familiar faces and smell familiar smells. I'm not saying they're good smells or bad smells. That's for you to decide, depending on what ground you're visiting at the weekend. But we'll be back next Monday, looking back at the weekend that was, and we shall see you in a week.
Cheers.